Okay, so Lindsay's getting married. We want the equation to show cost. And the cost is C in terms of the number of guests. So for the first option, it is $30 for every guest. So that is the rate, 30G. And we have a set cost of $1,600. So there's my first equation, 30G plus 1,600, and that takes care of the golf course. Now, this would be considered partial variation because it is not going through 0, 0. If you had 0 guests show up to your party, you'd still be on the hook for $1,600 to rent the golf course. The other option is also going to be C, but in this case, you have $50 for the guests and no set charge for the hall. This is considered direct variation because if I sub in 0 for G, I get 0 for C. So 0, 0 is a point. That makes it direct variation. So there's my two equations. And now I'm going to develop a table of values from 0 to 300 guests in increments of 50 for each option. So, very first one, we know that if you have 0 guests, it's going to cost you $1,600. And that's going to go up by $30 a guest. $30 times 50 is plus your 1,600 is equal to so there's 50 guests that have been added. So 50 times the 30. Now, if you've got 100 guests at 30 a pop, that's 3,000 plus the 16 is 4,600. Okay, 150 times 30 plus 1,600, you're looking at another 6,100. 200. $250 times the 30 plus the 1,600. You've got last one, 300 times 30 plus 1,600. All right, you can check the math there because I didn't use a calculator, but each time you're just subbing in your G value into this equation right here. Okay, sub in your G and solve for C. Second one, you've got the second equation now, C and 50G. C is cost, $50 per guest. So now let's go through that. There's our first equation, and now our second one. If you have 0 guests, you cost $0 because 0 times 50 is still 0. Now, 50 times 50 Okay, with 50 guests, it is cheaper to go with the second option, the hall. Now, what about 100 guests times 50? Well, 50 times 100 is 5,000. 100 guests, 4,600. 100 guests, 5,000. Now, at this point, it is actually cheaper to go with the golf course. Let's just finish this up. All right, so I finished it up, got my numbers, just subbing in for G and solving for C with this equation right here. And we see that although it starts off with the golf course being more expensive, it turns to cheaper at somewhere between 50 and 100 guests. Okay, somewhere between those two numbers is the sweet spot where they're equal. Where they cross over, where the point of intersection is the point where the number of guests determines the exact same cost. Doesn't matter which one you use. That's your point of intersection. Before your point of intersection, the golf course is better. After your point of intersection, vice versa. Before your point of intersection, the hall is better. After the point of intersection, the golf course is better in terms of cost. Determine the point of intersection of the two lines and explain what it means within the context of this question. So again, it's somewhere between 50 and 100 that it crosses over. We need to graph it in order to improve that answer. Okay, so I've graphed C equals 50G and C equals 30G plus 1600. And these are what the two graphs look like. The blue one is the golf course. The red one is the hall. So early on, the hall is cheaper until it gets to that point of intersection at about 80 guests and $4,000. At that point, after 80 guests, the golf course is cheaper. So in the context of the question, prior to 80 guests, the golf course is more expensive and the hall is cheaper. After 80 guests, the golf course becomes cheaper and the hall becomes more expensive. And exactly at 80 guests, either of them are equally good options. Neither of them cost more than the other. It's personal preference. So determine the point of intersection, done. Explain what it means, done. If they expect 250 guests, which one should they choose? So let's go back to that graph. 250 guests is way over here. So the cheaper one is blue, which is the golf course. The golf course is cheaper at 250 guests. So there's systems, making multiple lines and seeing where they cross. Your homework is page 245, 3 to 5, 9, 13, 14, and 16. So there we go.